Good evening, I'm Antalya Czerwińska, and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. During his appearance at the ECOFIN summit in Warsaw, Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański made himself very clear. Poland wants the EU to reach an agreement on loans intended for defense spending of up to 150 billion euros as soon as possible. I will discuss this topic in more detail with my guest, Poland's former Finance Minister Paweł Wojciechowski, later on in the program. More on that in just a moment, but before we dive in, let's take a look at the latest headlines. U.S. Special Envoy proposes giving Russia ownership of Ukrainian occupied regions. But what does Ukraine have to say about this controversial proposal? Safety and security of Poland take center stage during a presidential debate on Friday night. And finally, Polish astronaut has just finished his NASA training and is ready to go into space. An informal meeting of 27 EU finance ministers ECOFIN in Warsaw has come to an end. The discussions stemming from a volatile situation on the continent focused on the EU Commission's Rearm Europe scheme, European Defence Mechanism, and the implementation of the SAFE mechanism, allowing for the distribution of loans for defence purposes. Sasha Farbach took a deeper dive into the subject and has this report.
The EU has big plans for ramping up defence investment, and Europe's finance ministers gathered in Warsaw to discuss how to pay for it. One major way to help Europe strengthen its defence industry is with the new so-called SAFE instrument, allowing for billions in joint procurement. Warsaw has made this a top priority.
I'd like to underline that the aim of the presidency is to finalize the work on this package urgently. The Rearm Europe plan outlines several ways to finance increased defense spending. One of its key elements is, of course, the SAFE instrument, a loan mechanism of up to 150 billion of joint procurement. As the presidency, we are aiming at swift agreement on the SAFE instrument, preferably already in May.
In response to increasing threats from Russia and uncertainty around the traditional transatlantic partnership, Europe is taking steps to enhance its defense capabilities and autonomy. Brussels' Rearm Europe plan aims to unlock 800 billion euros for defense, promote joint procurement, and provide fiscal flexibility for member states to increase defense spending. SAFE instrument is designed to support key areas critical to European defense.
This will provide loans to member states to invest in key defense areas like ammunition, missiles, drones, and cybersecurity.
These elements will be crucial in defending NATO's eastern flank, but ministers also emphasize that the threats go beyond the Baltic and the High North. The Atlantic is equally at risk from Russia's aggression.
We have to look to all the borders of Europe. There are threats all over different borders of Europe. Portugal is responsible for a significant part of the western border of Europe in the Atlantic. And we know that even Russia has ships crossing the Atlantic and our sovereign waters, looking for infrastructures like submarine cables. So the defense of Europe has to be holistic, consider all the borders.
Warsaw meeting wrapped up with the 27 EU finance ministers plus representatives from the UK, Norway, Switzerland and key institutions like the European Investment Bank. Discussions also covered the Polish presidency's European Defence Mechanism, which focuses on funding frontline states like the Baltics and Nordics to meet urgent defence needs. Over 2 days, it was clear Europe is poised to ramp up efforts and spending to hit ambitious defence targets in uncertain times. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
And now it's time for us to move to Ukraine. On Saturday, in a social media post, Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the death of a pilot and the loss of his aircraft during a combat mission. We are now connecting live with our correspondent, Oz Kataji, who is in Lviv and has more on this story. Good evening, Oz. So what do we know about the pilot who lost his life, and what were the circumstances of the crash?
Good evening. Well, we know the pilot was called Pavlo Ivanov. He was 26 years old. President Zelensky awarded him posthumously with the Hero of Ukraine award. Now, it's unclear the circumstances that led to his death. That has not been disclosed by the Ukrainian government. They have launched an investigation, an interdepartmental investigation into the circumstances surrounding the incident. He was on a combat mission. This wasn't a training exercise. This was a combat mission on Saturday in which this pilot tragically lost his life. Now, the Ukrainian Air Force praised him, saying Ukrainian pilots are working to their fullest extent of their human and technical capabilities, risking their lives every time they carry out a combat mission. Pavlo was one of them. President Zelensky also promised a strong and precise response once the investigation has been concluded into the circumstances surrounding this issue. This is a big blow to the Ukrainian government. They don't have many F-16s. Now, while they haven't officially disclosed the number of F-16s they have, it is only a small number that was handed over to them by the US and European countries, giving them their old stock of F-16s. So they don't have many of these F-16s in their kit. So losing one will be a devastating blow, but losing a pilot will be an even bigger blow to the Ukrainians.
Thank you so much. Oz Kataji reporting live from Lviv. The skies over Kyiv were again set ablaze on Friday night, only hours after U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff visited St. Petersburg for talks with Vladimir Putin. After the meeting concluded, President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Kellogg, appeared to have suggested that Ukraine could be partitioned like post-war Berlin, a statement that he later backed out of. Marek Steele has more on the events that unfolded and has this next report.
The skies over Kyiv on Friday night. The military said it shot down 56 out of 88 drones launched at the Ukrainian capital. But damage could not have been prevented. 3 people were injured in the attack.
The enemy attack resulted in a fire on an area of 1,500 square meters. The fire has been contained and is not spreading.
We can't go now. When do you plan to go?
Evacuations continue in eastern Ukraine, Donetsk region, but reluctance to leave their homes behind still prevails among some residents.
We persuade them. We also have coercive measures, but we try not to use them. The guardianship authorities have the right to temporarily remove children from families that refuse forced evacuation.
Russian forces are putting pressure on large parts of the front line in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions of eastern Ukraine. The area witnessing the fiercest fighting is around Pokrovsk. Ukraine desperately needs air defense, the country's president told the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which met Friday in Brussels.
10 Patriot systems, the free wall has them. What is needed now are political decisions to make them work for peace. We need that result.
U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff visited St. Petersburg for talks with Putin on Friday. The 4-hour-long conversation concerned a settlement in Ukraine, the Kremlin said. Reuters reported that Witkoff supported a strategy that would give Russia the 4 eastern Ukrainian regions it annexed illegally in 2022, although Moscow does not fully control them.
Witkoff is in Moscow and no one from Washington is in Kyiv. So, of course, it concerns because ending the war in Ukraine's aim too.
At the same time, U.S. and Ukrainian delegations met in Washington to speak about the U.S. proposal to gain access to Ukraine's mineral wealth. According to Reuters, the meeting had an antagonistic atmosphere. Talks seem to have stalled on all ends.
Russia has to get moving. Too many people are dying, thousands a week, in a terrible and senseless war.
Meanwhile, President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Kellogg, appeared to have suggested that Ukraine could be partitioned like post-war Berlin. The official has, however, backed out of the words quoted by The Times. Ukraine, while willing to negotiate over the disputed land, would never agree to cede ownership of any of its territories to Russia, officials have repeatedly said. To help preserve their own statehood, more and more Ukrainian civilians are signing up for shooting lessons.
We don't know what is going to happen.
Ukrainian military intelligence suggests that the Russians may be preparing for another offensive against the Kharkiv region. Preparedness may come in handy. Marek Steele, TVP World.
Ukraine's NATO membership should still be on the table, said Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey, taking place on Saturday. The event was also attended by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in a rare case of the two officials being at the same venue at the same time. Our correspondent Kazimierz Łysiak attended the forum and has this next report.
It is indeed a rare occurrence for Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha to be at the same building at the same time as his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The two officials held separate discussion panels here during the second day of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. I've seen both delegations moving to different rooms at a different time so to not bump into each other by accident. And the Ukrainian Foreign Minister came out swinging by criticizing indirectly US President Donald Trump for his recent decision to take off NATO's membership off the table as part of the peace negotiations with Russia.
Ukrainian membership in NATO should not be off the agenda. That's about transatlantic security. That's about our contribution. Ukraine now has 110 brigades with daily combat experience.
Minister Sybiha then doubled down on Kyiv's approach to the long-term peace agreement and the territorial concessions.
Ukraine will never accept any initiative, any formula at the cost of our territorial integrity and sovereignty and security. And here with us, Mustafa Aga. I would like to applaud. He is a true symbol of resilience and resistance. Crimea is Ukraine.
This statement is not related to the short-term immediate ceasefire proposed by the United States earlier last month, which Ukraine agreed to and Russia refused. Minister Lavrov, on the other hand, during his speech at the forum, mostly repeated Russian cookie-cutter false claims about Ukraine and Moscow's alleged desire for peace. I confronted the notion of Russia wanting peace with the Polish ambassador to Turkey, who also went on a monitoring mission to Ukraine back in 2014 during the Russian annexation of Crimea.
I saw with my own eyes how it was prepared, how it started, all this hybrid, let's say, phase of this war. To me, I mean, it was really a big lesson. Especially, I remember my talks with Ukrainian soldiers after the Minsk agreements were concluded. The ceasefire started, and it was violated. I mean, on daily basis. I mean, so they asked me, you know, what happens, I mean, after a hybrid war? What? A hybrid peace. So the very idea of hybrid peace, because, I mean, so we talked a lot about hybrid war, but we should also keep in mind that peace can also be hybrid.
The last notable time that Minister Sybiha and Lavrov were in the same building at the same time was in December last year in Malta during a session of the OSCE. Back then, Minister Sybiha, along with Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, both decided to leave the plenary hall before Minister Lavrov had even entered the room as a sign of protest. As far as we know, here in Antalya there was also no direct or indirect contact between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations, at least according to Minister Lavrov. While the two ministers came here to gather support for their causes from other world leaders and diplomats, the end of the war is still nowhere to be seen. From Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Kazimierz Łysiak, TVP World.
This was one of the first presidential debates in a series of discussions between presidential hopefuls ahead of Poland's elections set to take place on May 18th. One of the main topics on the agenda was the future of Poland's defense and military service in light of the danger looming from the east. During the almost 3-hour debate, the candidates had a lot to say. Zuzanna Jurek has this report.
On Friday, Poland's presidential hopefuls went head-to-head in the first debate of this year's race to the palace. Security was on the top of the agenda of the Koński exchange, in particular the strengthening of the Polish armed forces, which comes amidst the announcement of the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk to restore voluntary military training for citizens.
I want a safe Poland without war, a Poland that performs its duties also at the Ministry of National Defense. And we know about the decline in the dynamics of territorial defense enlistments. This is the real problem today.
I'm against conscription. Poland must not only have the largest army in Europe, it already has one. If we leave out Turkey, it must be the best equipped modern army. It must be an army which is also strengthened by a deep reserve.
The leading candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski, the incumbent Warsaw mayor and Poland's centrist presidential candidate, and Karol Nawrocki, the right-wing historian supported by the Law and Justice Party, were in unison when it came to the priorities of the Polish armed forces, with focus on armaments. This also included Speaker of the Parliament, Szymon Hołownia, supported by Centre-Right Poland 2050.
When it comes to the Polish army, it's not the numbers that count, but the equipment. The basic task of the army, which I will oversee as president, is to acquire the ability to neutralize dangers before they reach the territory of Poland, and not after they have occurred.
Candidates were also in agreement on multilateral alliances.
Of course, the most strategic alliance for Polish security is the North Atlantic Alliance.
Of course, it is necessary to build very good relations with the United States, because this ally is very important. And here we have very strong cards because we buy our own equipment, because we invest in our own defense industry.
Heated arguments were exchanged on the matters of migration policy.
Today we have a problem with hybrid warfare on our eastern border. Unfortunately, our predecessors, the Law and Justice Party, were giving out visas left and right. They let in hundreds of thousands of migrants. They were unable to control the border.
At the same time, other candidates pointed out incongruities in Trzaskowski's views.
The Polish government abdicated its responsibility to take care of the border, while Rafał Trzaskowski, still as Minister for European Affairs, approved letting in illegal migrants. Today we drew this version of Rafał Trzaskowski, who is against migrants. This changes every now and then.
One candidate's pro-Russian views stunned the others.
The Republic of Hungary, under the leadership of Viktor Orban, is also in the EU and NATO. Are they under any threat? No, the Fidesz party has not pursued an offensive policy.
Despite the heated content of the debate, several absences also struck a chord. Amongst them, left-wing candidate Adam Zamberg, as well as far-right libertarian candidate Sławomir Mencen, who has so far been trotting behind Nawrocki and Trzaskowski in the polls.
I would quite clearly state that Sławomir Mencen is going to be the loser of this debate. Not participating in the debate will be probably, I would say, a dot over I in this regard.
But despite the popularized saying that elections are won in Konskie, this debate is just one amongst others anticipated to take place ahead of the May 18th first round of the elections.
On Saturday, the Polish capital saw a march to mark 1,000 years of the Kingdom of Poland, with a throng of right-wing politicians taking part in the event. And yet, for many Poles gathered in Warsaw, the parade was an opportunity to celebrate long Polish history and abundant heritage. Piotr Miszczuk attended the happenings in Warsaw and has this next report.
More than 1,000 pairs have danced today the Polonaise. This is the most typical Polish dance, usually danced at formal occasions such as proms. But this event was to mark 1,000 years since the first coronation of a Polish king. So since the beginning of the Kingdom of Poland, people from all around the country came to Warsaw to take part in this event.
I'm attracting attention with my beautiful traditional Polish outfit. I have dressed up for this celebration. After all, such a Millennium Polonaise happens once in 1,000 years, so I'm very happy to be here to take part in this unique event, and I tell everyone that one day I will tell my grandchildren that I was here and danced in the Polonaise of the Millennium.
But apart from the Polonaise that so many people took part in, this event is also about the march. Thousands of people have come to the city center of Warsaw, some of them to show their patriotic values, others to show support for the largest opposition grouping, the Law and Justice Party.
Few countries can boast a 1,000-year kingdom tradition, right? So it's primarily about that, but also a big coming together of right-wing circles. This is a political event. very important, especially now in the ongoing campaign.
This has truly been a political event with so many politicians from the Law and Justice Party, the largest grouping of the opposition. One of them was Karol Nawrocki, the presidential candidate backed by the Law and Justice Party. He delivered a speech to the crowd. This event might be considered success for the Law and Justice Party, but next month we will see a response from the Civic Coalition. This is the largest grouping of the government, and they will have their own march on the 25th of May. For TVP World from Warsaw, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
This is a day where human pursuit of space is being celebrated. April 12th marks the International Day of Human Spaceflight. On this day in 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human launched into space. Poland saw its first and only citizen, General Mirosław Hermaszewski, on the Earth's orbit in 1984. But now things are about to change as another Pole is getting ready to take a look at the blue planet in all its might. Sonia Gatabiszczan reports.
Ignition. Engine full power, and liftoff.
12th of April marks the International Day of Human Spaceflight. On this day in 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human to fly to space.
He spent 108 minutes in orbit and landed back to Soviet Russia.
I am doing this in my name, and if you permit, yours.
In 1978, Poland became the fourth nation to send a human to space when General Mirosław Hermaszewski participated in the Soviet space program Interkosmos.
He spent a week on board Salyut space station. He conducted many experiments during this time.
And in the coming weeks, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, who has just completed his NASA training program, is expected to become the second Pole to go to space. Uznański is also going to conduct various tests on board the International Space Station.
Those experiments are important, so I think in the long run, some of them will benefit life on Earth and thus the economy.
In 2022, the space economy was estimated at $460 billion, but the approximate value of space for the broader economy amounted to $3.1 trillion.
But we're talking about space for the wider economy, and it can be in sectors like energy, transport, pharmaceuticals and the likes, and security and defense in particular.
With the rise of private companies developing reusable rocket parts, making spaceflight cheaper and more accessible, and even opening the door to space tourism, the space sector has changed significantly since the first human spaceflight. Yet experts emphasize that one element remains the same: cooperation.
Human spaceflight is still today an important element to work together across nations.
For the longest time, the United States, regardless of the activities on Earth and conflicts, had to send astronauts into space with Russia.
That's because the Soyuz rocket was the only vehicle available to fly astronauts at the time. Against this backdrop, NATO Secretary General shared on Saturday that Russia may be considering the use of nuclear weapons in outer space. This would be a violation of the Outer Space Treaty, which states that space shall be the province of all mankind. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
The ECOFIN, an informal meeting of finance and economy ministers, has come to an end in Warsaw. The major subject on the agenda were, without surprise, defense funding for Europe, Rearm Europe scheme, European defense mechanism, and obtaining funds for further support for Ukraine. How is Europe planning to fund its endeavors to protect itself? Where are the monies going to be distributed in the defense landscape? Joining me now in the studio is former Polish Finance Minister Paweł Wojciechowski. Good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for
Good
joining.
evening. Very nice to be here.
So, ECOFIN, we're looking at the very end of the meeting that took 2 days. It was informal, but a lot of things were said. So let's listen to Andrzej Domański and see what he had to say after the meetings.
We do understand that it's time for Europe to take steps to improve its security, to take more responsibility for our own security in Europe. And as you know, the motto of Polish presidency is Security Europe. And therefore, I'm really glad that we can discuss this important subject here in Warsaw.
So, reiterating, the motto of Polish presidency is Security Europe. The Polish presidency is clearly pushing for the introduction of the SAFE mechanism. What is the SAFE financial mechanism and what does it entail?
Well, let's put it in
in the envelope of 800 billion euro concept for boosting defense investment in Europe. And this portion of 150 billion euro, it's a that's a security action for Europe. This is a special instrument that could be used very soon, this year.
So we're talking this year already?
This year, yes. Now the countries would have to prepare their plans, like for example, East Shield, the Poland Prime Minister Tusk is very much advocating this is the exact type of project we should fund from the SAFE. And this is providing loans, but it's getting the money from the capital market. And of course, the money that is there is cheaper. For example, that you could get from by issuing, the government bonds by the Polish government. So in fact, some countries like Poland might be very much interested. Some others maybe not, because, for example, the cost of financing by Germany is more is better than it's more beneficial than issuing the EU bonds. Mm-hmm. But other countries, even for example, Italy could benefit from that type of instrument.
So how do you think EU could actually make those loans happen? Is there any way that somebody could actually veto this idea?
Not really. That would be. This is like a kind of a national envelopes type of approach. It's unlike the different second instrument that is being invented. Pretty much, and is being proposed by the think tank Bruegel from Brussels, which is the instrument of European defense mechanism. This is much more ambitious, because it is an instrument that is pretty much focusing on a common procurement of those strategic, enablers, so-called, which Europe lacks, because it's very fragmented, and like air defense, missile, those type of elements like European HIMARS, let's call it, and other type of armaments are very difficult to procure in Europe, because Europe is very fragmented, and you need some type of consolidation on demand side. So this other instruments, European defense mechanism, has been also, is being now discussed, and I think this is much more promising, because it's promising because that would consolidate and would fill the gaps, both in technology, in terms of fragmentation, in terms of interoperability among different systems. Please remember that, for example, Europe has 9 different, combat tanks. Poland has 5 different types. It's the record in the world.
It seems very fragmented in terms of...
It's very fragmented. Even, purchasing, K2 Abrams, or Leopards and other tanks, Poland has 5. The interoperability is a very important element in the battle. So we need to think about how to create common ground for mutual procurement, and this European defense mechanism. It will allow to do that, because it will be common procurement. Those type of, for example, elements that would be procured would become assets, common European assets, and would not diminish the fiscal space that all European countries have, and to different degrees. Some of them have bigger fiscal space, some of them are smaller. So this is an interesting concept. I think it will go forward for further discussion. But for now, this first element is safe, 150 billion euro. Second element is
Each
EIB,
step at a time.
European Investment Bank, which is loans, and also, they move the possibility from having the dual use type of projects also for defense projects. So it's very good. And the third one would be European defense mechanism.
During the meeting, Spain also suggested, yet again, another country, another member, asking for the same thing. When are the Russian assets going to be used? The frozen Russian assets, a conversation that we've had for many months now. What would have to happen for Russian assets to be finally used?
I guess atrocities and more atrocities, I would say, and some change in U.S.-European relations. In terms of having the Americans to agree that this is first of all, that's a good thing, would not jeopardize financial markets and the confidence in those markets. And I think this is all feasible in the future if Putin would keep very strong on what he wants. Okay, so I think this is he's very demanding and he doesn't soften his stance, vis-a-vis the potential ceasefire, and that creates a more and more motivation to kind of take the frozen assets, But of course, some countries are very much against it, still.
Thank you so much. Paweł Wojciechowski, former Polish finance minister. It was great to have you in the studio. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you very much.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features for you to enjoy.